Mother is dead. Over the last few months, I've been eyeballs deep in studying the faith healing movement and all of the tactics that are used by faith healers and pastors that claim that they can pray over you and cure you of whatever ailment that you have. I've seen a lot of crazy stories. Not a lot surprises me at this point. But I recently put out a video about the absolutely crazy life story of the traveling faith healing con artist Jack Coe. Definitely go check that video out, but for now, here's the 20-second recap. It's post-World War II Cold War America, religion is seeing a huge resurgence, and revival preachers are traveling the country holding massive faith healing rallies, claiming that they can miraculously cure people. One of the biggest is a con artist named Jack Coe, who publishes a magazine called The Herald of Healing, where he brags about his so-called miracles, sells products, and ropes in new marks for his ongoing scam. Now, back to our dead mother. While doing research for that video, I stumbled across this. Mother is dead. And when I read those words, they literally screamed off the page at me. The context behind what I read is like nothing I've ever seen, and really highlights something important about the psychology of people who want to believe in a particular thing, as well as certain psychological tactics that faith healers will use, and it's underlined in this story. This is a letter that's being written from someone to the Reverend Jack Coe. Starts off, "Mother is dead. A few months ago, you prayed for her, Brother Coe, and God healed her, but now she's dead. I wrote you an article which you published in the Herald of Healing concerning her being healed of asthma and heart trouble, but now she's dead." He goes on to talk about how much he missed her, how he joined the army and was living a life of sin and caught up in the wrong crowd, and gives this whole testimony, and then talks about how he was discharged from the military right before Korea. He gave his life to God.
"I have sinned against you, my Lord."
And his mom was completely overjoyed because church was a huge part of his mom's life. But one day, the enemy struck. The long-time disease of asthma was making a desperate bid, and Mother was making a desperate struggle. This is before Jack Coe prayed over her. She got worse from day to day, sleep vanished, time stopped. Only the haunting asthmatic wheeze created an atmosphere of weird music for the march of a black-robed intruder. My brother and I put Mother in a car and started for the hospital. By the time we had driven a few blocks to the fire station, Mother was tearing the air with her hands and rocking backwards and forwards. We fanned desperately. We seized the opportunity to give her some oxygen at the fire station, but she fought it and groaned. "Don't!" I ran and called an ambulance. Mother was dying. That day I learned how selfish the world is. We drove madly with the sirens screaming, but people refused to get out of the way. Mother's eyes had already set, and that glassy stare was fixed upon nothing. Her thin gray hair floated around as if it were not attached to anything, making a sort of halo. How many trips like that Mother took? An asthma specialist in California admitted the medical profession's inability to heal her. He said also that there was nothing known that could reach her heart, it was so weak. Brother Coe, the medical world needs to be introduced to God. If they have nothing to meet the need when it gets too far along, they need to know about God. You understand, sir, because you prayed for her and God healed her. What medicine didn't know how to do, they had to admit, was done. A doctor at McAlester, Oklahoma examined Mother and found no trace of asthma, and her heart was in perfect condition. Again, Mother began to live. She testified of God's great power. Everywhere she went, she had that wonderful testimony of healing, and God blessed her for it. Now, I want to add in the margins here, as someone who in the past had asthma that would come and go when I was a kid, oftentimes there are things that can trigger it. It can be exercise induced, or if there's certain pollution or allergens or something, you're not necessarily going to have asthma 24/7. So just because her asthma comes and goes, yeah. Then, one winter day, one of my sisters took acute indigestion and lay doubled up on the floor. Mother ran to my brother's home and he called the doctor. It didn't hurt Mother at all at the time. I remember her rejoicing at the strength and health the Lord had given her. Then she began to take cold. Notice he doesn't mention how long it is between her initially feeling okay and taking cold. Was it a few days? Was it 10 minutes? Who knows? It dragged on for days. I took Mother back to McAlester, where she was living with another one of my sisters, but the cold still held on. She was taken to the doctor, and he suggested giving her intravenous feeding for quick energy, which they did. Mother began to toss and moan and acted very much as if she was suffering with asthma. Huh, that's peculiar. She was put under an oxygen tent, but her condition got worse. He goes on to say how he and his brother got there, but his mom was already unconscious from the morphine that they'd given her. His sister was there. His sister got to say goodbye to her mom and basically said that their mom was just speaking in tongues and super into God and worshiping and stuff. His mom said that she didn't think that she could make it. Then she said, "Come and get me, blessed angel band." I went over and called, "Mama, this is Vancel. Victor and I are here." She groaned what sounded like, "Huh?" I repeated, Victor and I are here. She groaned 1,000 miles away. As if to say, okay. On and on she groaned until I became conscious that she was trying to say something. I stooped to hear, and there, with all the misery and pain, she was saying, precious Jesus, precious Jesus. The doctor came about 8 p.m. and told us that if she lived through the night, she had a good chance of recovery. He told the nurse later that she wouldn't make it through the night. Now her breathing grew further and further apart, her eyes half closed. She looked like she was looking right at me, standing there holding the pillow up under her with one hand and rubbing her cheek and brow with the other. My brother was holding one of her hands and my sister was holding the other. My sister said, she looks like she's dead now. Mother got another breath, and we all watched anxiously for the next. After a long time, I begged her to take another breath. She took a faint breath, and again, that long silence. 5:17, mother, 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 gone. The day of the funeral came and my sister came to McAllister with the body. Brother Coe, listen to this. She said an autopsy had been made and the cause could not be determined. In other words, it was neither asthma nor heart trouble. He literally says that. He says, it was neither asthma nor heart trouble. Now the question is he reading that into it where because they couldn't determine the cause of death, therefore it wasn't asthma or heart trouble? Or were there signs that it wasn't asthma or heart trouble? Mother just wanted to go with that blessed angel band. To say that it was just that she wanted to go and it had nothing to do with the fact that for weeks she was struggling with breathing and with asthma-like symptoms, that's a bit of a stretch. And the fact that before this, he says that while she's struggling in the hospital, she's tearing for air and it looks exactly like how it used to look. That tells me that either it wasn't initially asthma, it was something else, and that the initial doctors saw the symptoms of her wheezing and gasping for air and assumed it was asthma, but it wasn't necessarily. And so then when the autopsy results came back, then they might not have found something that looked like asthma, but it could have been exactly the same thing that she struggled with all along that Jack Coe allegedly healed her of. The other thing is, this is the 1950s, so you're talking medicine that's nowhere near where it is today. So for doctors to say that something is or isn't asthma, or, I don't know how accurate the autopsy reports were then, but just because doctors in the 1950s might not be sure about something, that doesn't necessarily say a whole lot.
I'm afraid he's gone.
Whoa, Doc, I ain't dead.
Excuse me, I believe I'm the doctor.
He goes on to say how after that his sister gave her life to the Lord because she couldn't bear the thought of not seeing her mother again. Is mother dead? Doesn't she still live here? Haven't we just opened our hearts and let her take up an abode in there? Someday I'll meet her face to face. There will be so much to talk about. Here's the crazy part of this story. This entire letter that was sent by this guy, Vancel W. Garut from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, was sent to Jack Coe and published in Jack Coe's magazine, The Herald of Healing. Literally, this is the magazine where Jack Coe will publish all of his stories about these incredible miracles that God has done and all this evidence of healing. And here's a story where this woman clearly struggled with some breathing problem. She went to Jack Coe in order to be healed of it, and she died very shortly afterwards. She exerted herself in the cold air and had trouble breathing, had some type of a asthma attack or something, and died right afterwards. And yet, even still in the midst of it, they're giving credit to God and to Jack Coe for healing this woman. And this just shows me how insanely strong the cognitive dissonance is. That if people really, really want to believe, they will seize on and cherry pick any little bit of evidence in order to demonstrate that something is the way that they believe it to be. And in this case, literally this woman died, exhibiting all the same symptoms of something that this faith healer allegedly healed. And yet they wanted to believe it so badly that it didn't even matter that this woman died. Like, how much more evidence do you need? And yet he's sending in this letter as this incredible evidence of God's healing power. And Jack Coe's publishing it because he knows that there are other cases like this. He knows that there are loads of other people who are also coming in for healing and not being healed, or they're still exhibiting the same symptoms, or sometimes they're even dying because they're not going and seeking medical help because you would discourage them from that, or because they're exerting themselves when they shouldn't be. We pray over people whose necks were broken and take off the casts and have them move and walk around, take off back braces and leg braces and walk on broken feet. And in the moment, they're not feeling pain because there's adrenaline coursing through their body. But afterwards, after the fact, do these cures really last? by Coe submitting a story like this and saying, look, here's all this evidence that even though it's a failed miracle, he's still able to take credit for it and claim that it's somehow divine and healing. Jack Coe is sending a strong message to all of his readers that just because you doubt and you think that God hasn't done some miraculous healing and you wind up having a loved one die, even then it could still be this miraculous miracle, because how can you possibly speak out against that when anything is evidence? So I just wanted to share that story because it is the perfect example of cognitive dissonance, motivated reasoning, and cherry picking the evidence in order for it to support something that you already believe. And in this case, Jack Coe is using that in order to convince other followers and to keep other people from doubting and questioning. But that's just how insane the stuff that we're wading through with this faith healing series is. I hope you've enjoyed this story. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. And as always, dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.